The Battle of Sailors Creek was fought on April 6, 1865, near Farmville, Virginia, as part of the Appomattox Campaign, near the end of the American Civil War. It was the last major engagement between the armies of Confederate General Robert E. Lee and Union Army General-in-Chief Lieutenant General Ulysses S. Grant before the capitulation of Lee's Army of Northern Virginia at Appomattox Court House 3 days later. Background: military situation. Lieutenant General Ulysses S. Grant's Union Army broke the Confederate States Army defenses of Petersburg, Virginia at the Battle of Five Forks on April 1 and the Third Battle of Petersburg on April 2. A Union division under the command of Brigadier General Nelson A. Miles also broke up the last defense of the South Side Railroad on the afternoon of April 2, cutting off that railroad as a supply line, a route of retreat for the Confederates. General Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia evacuated Petersburg, Virginia and the Confederate capital of Richmond, Virginia on the night of April 2–3 and began a retreat in hopes of linking up with General Joseph E. Johnston's army confronting the Union Army Group commanded by Major General William T. Sherman in North Carolina. Battle of Namosian Church. Most of Lee's army marched west on roads north of the Appomattox River. On April 3, south of the Appomattox River, Union Army cavalry under Colonel William Wells' brigade of Brigadier General George Armstrong Custer's division pursued and engaged units of the fleeing Confederate cavalry rear guard under Brigadier General William Paul Roberts at Namosian Creek and Brigadier General Rufus Baring of W.H.F. Rooney, Lee's division, and the overall command of Major General Fitzhugh at the Battle of Namosian Church. Baring's Confederate cavalry had bought enough time for Major General Bushrod Johnson's infantry division to pass nearby Namosian Church. When General Johnson approached Namosian Church with his infantry division, Custer's men were forced to retire, allowing the Confederate forces to proceed across Deep Creek, an Appomattox River tributary. After dark, however, Wells' brigade continued to attack Fitzhugh's force along Deep Creek but were finally held off by Bushrod Johnson's infantry at Sweathouse Creek. Brigadier General Baring and many of his men were captured when Major General Philip H. Sheridan's scouts, who were wearing gray uniforms, led Baring and his remaining men into a trap. The number of Confederate killed and wounded are unknown, except that Bushrod Johnson reported 15 wounded. 350 Confederates were captured. The Union force sustained casualties of 95 killed and wounded at the engagements at Namosian Creek, Namosian Church and Sweathouse Creek on April 3. March toward Amelia Court House. Most of the Confederate army had marched about 21 miles west on April 3. in order to meet at the rendezvous point of Amelia Court House that had been designated by General Lee. All of the Confederate commands except those of Lieutenant General Richard H. Anderson and Major General Fitzhugh Lee would have to cross the Appomattox River, which turns sharply to the north not far west of the Confederate camps on the night of April 3. On April 4, most of the Confederate army moving over to the south side of the Appomattox River had to use a single muddy road or take widely circuitous routes, due to flooding and bridges being out on other roads, slowing progress toward the rendezvous point of Amelia Court House. By the evening of April 3, most of Lieutenant General James Longstreet's troops had crossed to the west side of the Appomattox River over Goods Bridge, while Major General John B. Gordon's corps was east of the bridge. Amelia Court House was 8.5 miles to the west. Ewell's force could not cross the river at the Jeneto Bridge as planned because a necessary pontoon bridge expected to be there had not arrived. After marching south, Ewell's men crossed the river on a Richmond and Danville Railroad bridge over which they had placed planks. They camped on April 4 about 1 mile west of the bridge. Gordon's Corps was at Scott's Shop 5 miles east of Amelia Courthouse, waiting for Ewell's column to catch up. Mahone's men marched to Good's Bridge but did not go into Amelia Courthouse until he was told that the force from Richmond had arrived. Beaver Pond Creek, on the line of march west toward the Confederate Army's rendezvous point of Amelia Courthouse on Bevel's Bridge Road. Lieutenant General Anderson had the remaining men of Major Generals George Pickett and Bushrod Johnson's divisions build earthworks and form a line of battle at Tabernacle Church Road to protect the forces in retreat from attack from the pursuing Union forces to the south. On April 4, Custer's Cavalry Division rode west toward Jettisville, Virginia on the Richmond and Danville Railroad, 8 miles southwest of Amelia Courthouse and 10 miles of Burkeville Junction, Virginia. Brigadier General Wesley Merritt with Brigadier General Thomas Devon's Cavalry Division crossed Deep Creek at Browns Bridge and headed straight past Tabernacle Church to Beaver Pond Creek, where late in the day, a Michigan regiment from the division sent Anderson's skirmishers back to the field works. Coming up toward the works, Devon's entire division, mostly dismounted, skirmished with portions of Major Generals Henry Heth's, Bushrod Johnson's and George Pickett's infantry. About 10 o'clock p.m., Devon was ordered to pull back to Jettisville and he led his men to that point after burning a nearby mill. Appomattox Court House. On the morning of April 4, Union Brigadier General Randall Mackenzie's command crossed Deep Creek and reached the Five Forks of Amelia County, only about 1 mile south of Amelia Courthouse, where his 1st Maryland Cavalry skirmished with the 14th Virginia Cavalry. An advance party of Union Major General George Crook's Cavalry Division reached the important railroad intersection of Burkeville Junction, Virginia by 3 o'clock p.m., blocking the Richmond and Danville Railroad route to the southwest. The main body of Crook's Cavalry Division and Brigadier General Joshua Chamberlain's Infantry Brigade from the 5th Corps also headed toward Jettisville, arriving before dark. A few hours later, the rest of the 5th Corps arrived at Jettisville and started to entrench, even extending the trenches across the railroad tracks. The arrival of the entire 5th Corps at Jettisville ended Lee's last chance to move south along the railroad, although if he had chosen to send Longstreet's Corps, which had arrived first at Amelia Courthouse south against the gathering Union force, his trailing divisions probably could not have caught up. Lieutenant General Richard Ewell's corps was still trying to cross the Appomattox River at 10 o'clock p.m. Anderson was still skirmishing with Devon at Beaver Pond Creek. Gordon was several miles behind at Scott's Shop, and Mahone was not far from Good's Bridge, waiting to protect the bridge in case Ewell could find no other river crossing. When Devon's cavalry broke off the engagement at Beaver Pond Creek, no Union force threatened the rear of Lee's army, and Anderson's and Mahone's forces did not need to lag behind as rear guards. They did not arrive at Amelia Courthouse until well into the next day. Lee had expected to find rations for the army at Amelia Courthouse but found only an inadequate stockpile of rations on a trainload of ordnance. Lee waited for the rest of the army to catch up and sent foraging parties into the county, which yielded few provisions despite Lee's personal appeal. In a proclamation that day, yet Union Army foragers were able to find abundant provisions on the march as the wagons began to fall far behind on the muddy roads. Lee also ordered 200,000 rations to be sent from Danville via the railroad. Sheridan intercepted this message at Jettisville later that day. Lee also ordered that the number of wagons and artillery pieces with the army be reduced and precede the infantry on the march with the best horses. The extra equipment was to be sent by a circuitous route to the north, with the weaker animals sent by rail or destroyed. The 200 guns and 1,000 wagons that Lee's army had taken on the flight would be reduced by almost one-third. A week later, Lee said the delay at Amelia Court House assured the Confederate defeat and surrender. Some modern historians have emphasized the failure to have an expected pontoon bridge at the Genita Road crossing was the key factor in keeping Lee's trailing divisions from reaching Amelia Court House on April 4. A pontoon bridge had been placed at Goods Bridge, but traffic there became heavily congested because the approaches to Bevel's Bridge also were blocked by high water. Lee did not mention the missing pontoon bridge in his remarks a week later, but instead blamed the delay entirely on the lack of supplies at Amelia Court House. But as some historians have pointed out, many of his men and wagons had not arrived at Amelia Court House on April 4 and were not in a position to advance until sometime on April 5. Even if he had not stopped the others to rest and forage, historian William Marvell wrote that, as badly as Lee needed to keep moving that night, he needed even more to concentrate his forces. Painville, Amelia Springs. On the morning of April 5, Sheridan sent Brigadier General Henry E. Davis' brigade of Major General George Crook's division to scout for Confederate movements beyond Amelia Court House near Painville, or Payne's Cross Roads, about 5 miles north of Amelia Springs. At Painville, Davis found a headquarters wagon train guarded by Brigadier General Martin Gary's cavalry brigade. This was the wagon train that he had left Richmond with provisions for Lee's army, including food and ammunition for Ewell's corps. Since it had followed a more circuitous route north of Genito Bridge on Painville Road, it had only some cavalry escort. The train crossed to the south side of the Appomattox River by the Clementown Bridge. His Davis brigade slowly passed the resort at Amelia Springs. The wagon train with excess artillery and equipment started up the Painville Road from Amelia Court House toward Painville at the same time as the wagon train from Richmond headed south on that road toward Painville. Local citizens began to spread out on horseback to warn the Confederates of the Union cavalry incursion. Davis attacked the lead section of the wagon train, 2 companies of artillery, 4 miles east of Painville, and quickly rounded up 300 soldiers and as many African-American teamsters. The Union cavalrymen cut many horses and mules out of the traces, captured 5 new Armstrong guns and burned more than 100 wagons of provisions. Davis' troopers destroyed Major General Custer Lee's supplies, including all the spare ammunition. Leading wagons from the train which left Amelia Court House, including Fitzhugh Lee's headquarters baggage, Robert E. Lee's headquarters wagons with many reports and some ambulances and medical supplies, also were caught by the Union raiders. Stragglers and sick soldiers finally gathered to stop the destruction. Before Davis could return to Jetersville, his brigade was attacked near Amelia Springs by Brigadier General Martin Gary's cavalry brigade and a much larger force of Thomas L. Rose's and Colonel Thomas T. Munford's divisions under Major General Fitzhugh Lee. Davis' force was driven back across Flat Creek, acting as a rearguard. The 1st New Jersey Volunteer Cavalry Regiment held off the Confederate pursuers, allowing Davis' main column with prisoners and captured horses, mules and artillery to move past Amelia Springs. At Amelia Springs, the other brigades of Crook's division under Brigadier General J. Irvin Gregg and Colonel Charles H. Smith provided reinforcements, allowing Davis' force to reach Jetersville with the prisoners, guns and teams. Davis returned with his men to Amelia Springs to help defend against the Confederate cavalry attack. Crook's cavalry division had casualties of 13 killed, 81 wounded and 72 missing, and probably taken prisoner in 3 encounters during the day. E.Lee said he counted 30 dead Union soldiers along the way. Davis captured 320 Confederate soldiers and 310 African Americans whom he described as teamsters. He also captured 400 animals and 11 flags while destroying about 200 wagons. Confederate casualties were unreported, but 2 Confederate captains are known to have been mortally wounded. Jetersville, having not been able to find much food in the Amelia Courthouse area and with the Union Army closing in, Lee started his army marching down the route of the Richmond and Danville Railroad toward Jetersville, Virginia at 1:00 p.m. on April 5. Nearing Jetersville and hearing skirmish fire in front, Lee discovered that his route to Danville along the railroad was blocked at Jetersville by the fast-moving Union cavalry under Major General Philip Sheridan. Union infantry was reported by cavalry scouts to be nearby, but in fact the 5th Corps had already reached Jetersville. Lee decided his men were too spread out and it was too late in the day to attack the Union force at Jetersville, so the Confederates would have to march back up the Richmond and Danville Railroad to road, upon which to make another night march to Farmville. At Farmville, 23 miles west on the South Side Railroad, Confederate Commissary General Isaac Street, John told General Lee that he would have 80,000 rations waiting. From Farmville, Lee might be able to reach the Richmond and Danville at Keysville, Virginia, if the Confederates could outpace the Union forces. The Confederate march was held up before the troops could reach Amelia Springs because a bridge was out at Flat Creek which needed to be repaired to allow the passage of wagons and artillery. During the night, Union spies dressed in Confederate uniforms were captured with a message that showed the disposition of the Union forces. Union Plan Lieutenant General Grant reached Major General Sheridan's headquarters at Jetersville about 10:30 p.m. Near midnight, Grant and Sheridan met with the ill Major General George Meade, commander of the Army of the Potomac. Grant said he had no doubt Lee was moving right then, but he did not order Meade to change his plan. Sheridan also was convinced that Lee would not remain static at Amelia Courthouse. Despite the skepticism about Lee staying at Amelia Courthouse, Grant directed him to advance early in the morning on Amelia Courthouse if Meade persisted in his view that that was the appropriate move. By this time, the 2nd Corps, 5th Corps and 6th Corps of the Army of the Potomac were available at Jetersville to move against the Confederate Army. The soldiers of Meade's 3 Corps were given coffee at 4:00 a.m. and were told to be ready to move at daybreak. In the morning, Humphreys discovered everyone asleep at William Haste's 2nd Division headquarters at 6:00 a.m. When the march was scheduled to begin, he replaced Hayes as division commander with Brigadier General Francis Barlow, who had just reported for duty. Barlow's division did not become engaged at Sailor's Creek because, based on erroneous information about a Confederate column, that division was ordered to move too far to the right. Opposing forces, Union Confederate initial movements, march and pursuit. Lee in fact had his army in motion on the night of April 5 to 6. Longstreet's combined 1st and 3rd Corps led the Confederate night march west, followed by 2 divisions commanded by Richard Anderson, Richard Ewell's Reserve Corps, the main wagon train, and John Gordon's 2nd Corps. Longstreet's route of march took his men to Amelia Springs, then on the road to Deatonville on the way to Rice's Station on the South Side Railroad. Lee's corps moved on parallel roads from Amelia Amelia Court House, but after they reached Deatonville, all the men and wagons would have to use a single road to move directly to Rice's Station, increasing the vulnerability while on the march. The only other route was the Jamestown Road, which left Deatonville to the north and only reached Rice's Station over a roundabout loop. Longstreet's corps left Amelia Court House first and arrived at Rice's Station starting about sunrise. Later in the morning, General Lee joined him. They planned to wait at Rice's Station for the rest of the army to catch up and to guard the town's South Side Railroad station from attack by the Union 24, which already had occupied Burkeville Junction. At daybreak, Fitzhugh-Lee's cavalry left Amelia Springs and marched to Rice's Station, where they joined with Longstreet's command. Major General William Mahone's division of the former 3rd Corps, now combined with Longstreet's 1st Corps, reached Deatonville before dawn on April 6. Mahone's men marched toward Rice's Station over the right-hand fork at Deatonville. They would move unhindered to Rice's Station, but the following infantry corps would not. Anderson's, Ewell's and Gordon's corps followed in line after Mahone's division. Rooney-Lee's cavalry division stayed behind when Fitzhugh-Lee left with the other cavalry so that Rooney-Lee's division could help Gordon's corps as a rear guard. The last of Gordon's soldiers had not reached Amelia Springs when the leading men of Longstreet's corps reached Rice's Station. The wagon trains were on the right flank of the soldiers of Lee's army, heading for a crossing of Sailor's Creek at Perkinson's Mill, near the creek's confluence with the Appomattox River. The troops planned to cross the river about 2 miles higher up on the road to Rice's Station. Ewell's corps did not leave Amelia Springs until 2:00 p.m. in order to guard the wagons, but moved ahead of them and close up with Anderson's corps when they did move out. On the route of march about 1 mile past Deatonville, the road to Rice's Station declined into a marsh in the area of Sandy Creek. Holt's Corner, where some fighting took place, was 2 miles down the road. Another 1.25 miles farther past the Hillsman House was Sailor's Creek. On the opposite side of Sailor's Creek was a steep bluff. About 0.5 miles past the bluff was another junction near James and Marshall's farm. Deep ravines were cut into the terrain by both branches of Sailor's Creek. General Humphreys described the country as broken, consisting of woods with dense undergrowth and swamps, alternating with open fields. Sheridan did not send the cavalry with Meade's infantry because of his conviction that Lee must have been moving west to try to outrun the Union army. Sheridan directed his cavalry to follow a road parallel and to the south of Lee's line of march to try to intercept the Confederates. Sheridan sent the cavalry west on the Deatonville-Rice's Station Road, with Crook's division leading the advance and Merritt's 2 divisions under Devon and Custer following behind, instead of sending them toward Amelia Court House with the infantry.